This is True Crime Kent.
Okay, we're back. The Shoemaker Part 2. And I'm really excited for this one. Not so much the next one, just because of how violent things are going to get. But we're going to cover a lot of wackiness in this one. And things are going to get silly here.
I love silly.
Well, you're getting ready to get a double dose of it, because when we left off in Part 1, Joe Kallinger had just taken over his family's shoe business after his father had retired, and he moved his crew into his old childhood home there above the shop. His parents moved in next door at 102 East Sterner Street, and from the outside, everything looks good. Everything seems right in the world. Like, he's got a success. He's just inherited the family business, his home that he grew up in. He's got a wife and 7 kids. Mom and dad live next door. From the outside, it looks good, but I gotta say, an unmedicated paranoid schizophrenic with a love of fire, a history of auditory and visual hallucinations, and a horrible upbringing has just moved back into the home where all of his trauma took place in the first place. So there's no way this is going to end badly. There's no way.
You know, in a neighborhood, when someone knocks on your door and like, hey, I just needed to let you know court ordered compels me to come to your door and let you know I'm a molester, sex offender, and I live.
Does that happen a lot in your neighborhood?
Well, not in my, but they have to. They have to.
I've never had that happen, but they do move in, so I don't think they do what they're supposed to do.
A lot of the times, I don't think they do. But can you imagine, like in this kind of a case, you know, on paper, this guy's scary as crap. Could you imagine if everybody had to like present their details when they showed up somewhere new? Hey, here's what I've done. Here's what. Anyway,
what would you have to say when you knocked on the door?
Hey, I've stolen.
What do you think you would accidentally just slip into old habits and start handing out brochures and shit?
No. I've moved on to more subterfuge when it comes to converting people.
No offense, Op. No offense.
Yeah.
But I really feel like if a solicitor knocked on my door, I would rather it be me finding out that a pedophile had moved into the neighborhood and he's doing his rounds, as opposed to a Mormon on a bicycle or a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
No offense.
No, there's an ick factor. A lot of people are uncomfortable with religion, and they're not uncomfortable with pedophiles. So there's that. So, go figure.
And that's probably me growing up in Kentucky.
No, I think I hear about it every day in the email replies. Hate you, Op. Stupid Mormon. If only you were a pedophile, we'd be fine. Love Kent.
What'd you say? What was that last? I missed that last.
But I love Kent. I don't get it.
And I don't know what that means.
But I do get it, but I don't get it. So.
Now, remember, Op, Joe has already conducted 40,000 experiments trying to save the human race. And his whole life's mission is by making a perfect pair of shoes. That's how he is, in his head, convinced that's the secret to saving humanity, a perfect pair of shoes. And in this pursuit of a perfect pair of shoes, logically, he gets 4 brown hamsters.
Okay.
And you probably knew I was going to say that. That is the next step, no pun intended.
Yep. It's not really the next step.
He named these hamsters Winko, Popsicle, Jelly Roll, and Humpty Dumpty.
Have you ever been to a Humpty Dumpty concert?
Never even heard of it.
It's cool. Winko? It's not a real name.
You ever been to a Jelly Roll concert?
No, but I'd like to go. If
Jess just mouthed, I wish, longingly while staring off at nothing, like she was thinking of... These hamsters, they're not here to be loved. They are here for experimentation. Now, Joe believed that in order to save time and materials on human trials, because it takes a lot of material to make a pair of shoes and then having to throw them away or cut them back up, what he could do instead was with these hamsters, make little bitty shoes and then do the testing on the hamsters with these little bitty shoes using little bitty wedges in these little bitty hamster shoes. And that's a pretty solid idea. Cute, if nothing else. I would argue that a hamster's foot and a human foot are way different and probably wouldn't translate over well. I feel like if a human foot were more like a hamster foot, like the arch part would be like a foot and a half long, right?
Yeah. So, okay, so he used hamsters as the focus group, the test group for his designs for humans.
That was the plan. We're going to find out it didn't work out, but that was the initial plan. I'm going to get these hamsters. I'm using all these materials, making these full-size shoes. I can cut down on time and material if I just make little hamster shoes.
I feel like you didn't even need to say it didn't work out. Like, I feel like we could have figured that one out.
It didn't work out probably for a reason that you're not thinking of, though.
Oh, weird. Okay.
Yeah, and, well, I don't know how to explain his line of thinking, so I'm just, for the next little bit, I'm going to let Joe talk about what was going through his mind and all this, okay? And I have listened to interviews with Joe, so I'm going to try to do my best impression of Joe. Last podcast on the left kind of went with like a more, like a kind of mumbling, like that, but... And I love Last Podcast on the Left. I'm not down on them. I love Marcus Parks and Henry Zabrowski. But in reality, Joe had a deeper kind of Buffalo Bill kind of voice.
Okay. Yeah, kind of a muffle, like he swallowed a hamster.
Oh, you're talking about a big old fat girl. Isn't that what he says when the cop asked him at the door about the missing girl? She that big old fat girl. He had and he also had dry mouth, a lot of like mouth noise.
Ew, fun. Yeah.
When he talked. So, this is where Joe's mind is. This is what he had to say about these hamster experiments. Here we go. Well, I'd already done over 40,000 experiments, most of them on myself, some on my wife and kids. I'd even talked the mailman into letting me put wedges in his shoes, so I did a few on him. But I'd never done experiments on animals before. I was going to make little shoes for their feet and little wedges to put into the shoes. I figured I'd get a lot of information that way. I believed that I'd find that human life could be prolonged through strong, healthy feet that were well balanced by wedges in the shoes. People die more quickly if they have bad feet. Take a look at any old person's feet, like someone 80 or 90 years old. Those feet are strong. They've walked that person through a long life. There was something else I wanted to find out from the hamster experiments, though. If you've got good feet, then your brain is in good shape too. The feet control the brain. This means that you've got durability and resistance in the feet, and you've got intelligence in the brain. I wanted to experiment on the connection between the hamster's feet and their brains. If they listened to me and did what I told them, then I'd know that the wedges and the little shoes I'd have made for them were doing them good by giving them greater durability and intelligence. Then they'd be obedient to me, their master. I eventually saw that there was no way I could make shoes and wedges for my hamsters. Their feet were too tiny. But I knew I could go on with the second part of the experiment, the connection between obedience and intelligence, even without the shoes. To make sure I didn't get the hamsters mixed up, they all looked alike. I put a name tag on the right rear leg of each one. I called them Winky, Popsicle, Jelly Roll, and Humpty Dumpty. And then I put them into a large cage with a small wheel in it. I knew the best way to test their intelligence and durability was on that wheel. If they had intelligence, they'd listen to me. They had durability. They'd listen and survive.
That last part about determining the loyalty of the hamsters sounds a little like the logic the military uses. We'll find out. Well,
Yeah.
intelligence and or durability. We'll find out who's a captain and who's a sergeant.
Just got to test the connection between the feet and the brain.
It's weird, though. What's chuckling me is his two
Joe, how in the
projects
world
he's
do you
working
expect these
on
hamsters
are
to listen to you
not anywhere
when they
even
don't speak any human
correlated.
language?
One is
Did
like,
you train
No,
them
they're not
by
related
hand
at all.
signals?
yeah, one is like Geppetto, like, I would like to create something that helps mankind. And the other one is Kim Jong-un. I want to find out how much everyone will obey me. Like, they're not the same camp at all, and you can't correlate the two.
You know, you said it's like the military, and I had like you said, and I said, test the connection between the feet and the brain, and in my head, I immediately started going, left, right, left, right.
And it's not wrong. I mean, they did the same thing as Joseph Kallinger, you know.
So at this point, now these quotes that I'm getting ready to say, they all come from a conversation that the author of the book, The Shoemaker,
What did they say?
had with Joe. Her name was Flora Schreiber.
Oh, sorry.
Great book.
I was following
Great book.
the
But at
script.
this point in the interview, Flora Schreiber, she interrupts Joe and she says, and I'll tell you what, let's let Jess be the voice of Flora Schreiber.
Okay, will you do it like a 1-800?
No, not like a phone sex operator. No, just
normal.
do it in a voice of a woman that's diligently taking notes and interested in what he has to say, like it makes sense at all.
Like it's 9 p.m. and it's like phone sex, but not phone sex, right? Can't, yeah. Yeah.
And I love that question because I would argue that hamsters don't speak any language.
I would agree with that.
But Joe responds to this with, I spoke to them in English, just like I'm talking to you. Duh. I pulled up a chair right next to the cage and I sat down and I told the hamsters everything I was going to do. It was very important to the future of mankind. I said that. They needed to obey me. I told them their feet were too small for me to make shoes and wedgies, but I promised to make them little hats and suits, even though I'm not a tailor, if they listened to me and survived. Flora, they understood every word I said. Now, no, you're fine. That's where you come in, but I want to interrupt you. Let me say that one part again. This man is sitting in a chair, basically screaming at a cage full of hamsters and trying to bargain with them to listen to his commands. He even made them an offer. If you listen to me, I'll make you guys some little hats and suits. That's ridiculous because hamsters hate little hats and suits. They like pants.
Is that the reason? Okay.
They like pants. They hate hats.
Okay.
Meanwhile, while all this is happening, guys, Joe's screaming at this cage full of hamsters about little shoes and hats and suits. His wife is just fucking making a casserole and smiling and pretending like everything is normal. Oh, Joe. You're funny. Joe. Joe with his hamsters.
Oh, man.
And then at this, Flora does say, well, what did they say, Joe? And he says, when she asked him what the hamsters said back, Joe goes, nothing. That was my second disappointment with it.
just come on. You wonder if at some point he did think that they were conversing and then they just kind of shut up, like.
Oh, yeah, we're going to find out here in a minute. He was worried about them plotting against him.
Naturally, as you
we'll
do.
get to that here in a second. And that's not a lie. That's true.
Wow.
He said, nothing. That was my second disappointment with them. First, I found I couldn't make shoes and wedges for their feet, and then I couldn't get them interested in my experiment. They didn't even perk up their ears when I told them about the hats and the suits. But I knew they understood me all right. They played foxy to throw me off my guard. They didn't listen. They didn't seem to want to get it, Flora. While I talked, they'd just ignore me. One would hop on the wheel and make it turn with motion of its feet on the little rungs, or they'd nibble at food I'd put in the cage. Hell, one of the smart asses kept eyeballing me with his little brown eyes, and then he'd lay in the corner and sulk. Finally, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere. I stopped talking and I started the experiment. They'd listen to me now, Flora, or they wouldn't survive.
What's happening with this guy? Jeez.
And right now I want to say I'm not taking any questions from anybody.
Okay.
I do feel like all this was pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, I won't ask any.
This is, so far, everything's making sense.
Yeah.
All jokes aside, if you're listening to this and you're wondering what the fuck is going on, that's fair. He is trying to crack the code that will save humanity. I don't know how. And at first, he wanted to make them little bitty hamster shoes and put wedges in them, but the hamster's feet were too small. So that's where we're at. In the end, what Joe ended up doing to these hamsters was just making them get on the running wheel and poking them with a pencil until they ran nonstop until they died.
Wow.
At 4 p.m., he started with poor little Winko. Winko ran until 2 a.m. from 4 p.m. with minimal breaks. He took minimal breaks, Joe did, because he said this is why Joe wanted to take minimal breaks. And this is about the plotting. The tags told me which one I'd be working with, but dozing off on the couch during a break, I'd start worrying that the hamsters might switch the name tags with each other to confuse me and make me screw up my experiment.
All right, so I'm not asking a question. I'm just making an observation. Like, since the last episode, he went from, like there were a lot of things that he was doing. I'm like, his upbringing. Da, da, da. He's now, like, squarely in, like, mental illness now. This isn't...
The move. I should have probably elaborated on that. He's in home. He's in this place now where all this trauma happened to him. It sent him over the edge. Like, moving back into this house just, like, was the last push.
Yeah.
That sent him into, like, oblivion.
Yeah. It's sad.
At 3 a.m., Joe put poor Winko back on the wall and prodded him for the last time, and poor little Winko pissed himself and then died. And at this point, if you're a listener and you have one of those feeder bottles, I'd like you to push that little metal ball in and pour one out for our dead homie Winko.
Okay.
Winko's 3 little friends suffered the same fate, unfortunately, one by one. None of the hamsters ever got their promised hats or suits, and they probably wouldn't have anyways because, as Joe mentioned, the big problem with that was he wasn't a tailor.
I don't know how I'm going to pull this off.
This is ridiculous. I'm not a tailor. This whole thing is ridiculous. I can't sew suits that small.
Like somebody else put him up to it. This is all self-imposed. Oh, man.
Now, I bet you're wondering what all this is supposed to prove. Like, what is all this about? And I know it seems confusing, but let me tell you, I don't know. I've read 2 books on this guy now. I would listen to every podcast on the guy. I've been reading for over a week and a half now, 2 weeks, newspapers. I feel at this point I'm kind of an expert on Joe Kallinger, and I don't know what this was all about. And that's probably the flaw in trying to discover like rationality in the mind of a unhealthy schizophrenic.
Yeah.
A mentally unwell schizophrenic. Now, at this point in the book, Flora asks Joe,
What would you have done if the experiment had succeeded?
and Joe excitedly goes, "Oh, I had great plans, Flora. I would have built a huge laboratory with a big wheel in it for big animals like elephants and lions. And, and then I would have gotten human beings, convicts from prisons and crazy people from the funny farms.
Crazy people, he says.
I'd run all of them through the experiments. I'd have had shoes and wedges for the big animals and the people. I would have found out how to keep people alive forever and ever. No one would ever die. If we all had the correct adjustment of shoes to feet, there'd be no more wars. We know how to get along with each other, how to solve problems. There'd be no more hate, only love. No more sickness, no crimes, no one locked up in prisons and funny farms. The feet control the brain, Flora. They're God's magic gift to us, but we've messed them up. If I could only take you through the world to show you the billions of sick, godless feet, that's why I've done over 40,000 experiments, not only to correct myself, but to save mankind."
It kind of reminds me of that Facebook post you made the other day about the 6-year-olds that were solving world issues by saving frogs.
Yeah.
Like, just...
And I realize I do sound like
Krang.
why did I just have a brain fart? Alex Jones right now.
Also,
Water's turning the frogs gay.
I was going to say, also the ideas sound like Alex Jones.
I gotta make little bitty wet shoes for the frogs. You know, the ones with the toes? So they can get better grip on slippery rocks.
Oh.
On January 30th, 1969, Joe buys a second house at 1808 East Haggart Street to use as a warehouse. Now, he doesn't buy out this to live in it. It's just a warehouse. That location is now an empty lot. Well, an empty lot / storage lot for a towing service. And you'll figure out why soon enough while that house isn't there anymore.
Okay.
He also planned on turning this warehouse, quote unquote, into a bit of like a man cave. And also, if he had time, a gateway to hell.
Yes, as you do. Okay.
On command of the devil.
Oh. Okay.
After purchasing this property, the devil tells Joe he needs to start digging in this building. Got to start digging, Joe. I don't want to tell you why, but this is it. You got to start digging here. And Joe, the keen listener that he is, through February and March of 1969, 3 times a week for 2 months, he would wake his kids up in the middle of the night, hike them to the building. He had them tear up the floorboards of the house inside and made them start digging a 20-foot deep hole in the middle of this house.
Okay.
Let me say that again. On school nights, these kids were having to get up at like 1 a.m, go to this house. They've already tore the floor up out of the center of the house and then start digging a 20-foot deep hole in the middle of the night by lantern.
Okay. And I'm guessing they never wanted to ask why. It wasn't a...
I mean, it was probably fun in the beginning.
Yeah.
But throughout the project, Joe would put up retaining boards to prevent the hole from caving in on them and killing them. By the time they were done, the hole was 20 foot deep by 5 foot around. And imagine being these kids at school. You know, usually kids are tired because these days are tired because they're on YouTube all night. They're watching fucking PewDiePie play Fortnite. These kids, though, Their hair's all fucked up and they got dirt on their shirt and they haven't slept because your crazy dad made you dig all night. Kids are soft these days.
Yeah, they.
Sitting there, like, trying to stay awake, and some spoiled kid's like, oh, shit, man, Mom packed bologna again. I hate bologna. Just, like, slow turn, look at him. On April 2nd, 1969, the 20-foot deep, 5-foot wide hole is done up. Probably the kids were very thankful, I would imagine. The only reason they stopped is because they hit water.
Oh,
They found the water table.
Dad, any further, we're going to make a river.
Joe immediately bans the kids from the building as well as everyone else. This building is now only for Joe. This hole became very important to him because down there at the bottom of the hole, according to Joe, the voices are clearer and there was less noise. He could hear them better. There was less distraction.
Okay.
This hole is where Joe would go to come up with ideas late at night. He would just go, he would put a 20-foot ladder in it. He would go to the bottom. He would climb to the bottom with a single candle. Just a candle, middle of the night, and basically an abandoned building. He bought it, but it was not in good shape. This building wasn't. Go down to this bottom of this 20-foot hole with a single candle. He would shove that candle into the side of the wall and light it, and then he would jerk off and shit in it.
What? Why?
That's what he needed to do to come up with good ideas. I'm not making this up. That's right. Jerk off and shit in it. Joe just begins the process of filling this hole with jizz and poopy.
Oh, okay.
It was his ritual. He'd go down there and jerk off and then, or sometimes he'd do it in the other order. He would poop and then jerk off on the poop, or he would jerk off and then poop on the semen.
Okay.
But this was to clear his head and try to do some thinking. These were thinking poos.
Yeah.
And I can kind of relate to this a little bit. I don't have a 20-foot hole in my basement, but I do come up with a lot of good ideas on the toilet. I have also jerked off in a hole that I've dug before, and that's also true. I jerked off in a machine gun position hole that I dug out in the Mojave Desert in California one night while my two friends were asleep next to me.
Okay.
That really happened. I jerked off all over the inside of my sleeping bag.
What?
And then it was like crunchy for the rest of the training exercise.
Okay.
But I did jerk off in a hole that I dug, so I do have a little bit in common with Joe Kallinger, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know what.
It's kind of, you feel close to your friends when you've literally climaxed while your elbows are touching.
Yeah.
And they didn't know that I was jerking off and a climax, so I don't even know if that's legal. I mean, I don't know. Is that sexual? Is that a sex crime?
I would say it's definitely not a community sport. If they don't know that it's happening.
To be fair, it was pitch black. They may have been jerking off too, and I just didn't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Look, what I was doing in that hole out in the Mojave Desert multiple times, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Joe is slowly filling this hole with poop and semen. And in Joe's head, the bigger the pile of shit, the better the idea would get. So if he got an idea after a really big shit, that was a winner of an idea as far as he was concerned with no further thought. So say he like drops one and looks down and it's a huge poop and he's like, airplanes should all have big hats. That was like, you could take that to the goddamn bank, buddy, because that shit was huge and now airplanes should have really big hats. All of them.
And then this became like like was he keeping a list of these ideas as he was
Just in his head.
yeah okay.
One night, deep down in that hole, he's wading around in his semen and poo. He's trying to think. He's got that candle just stuck into the walls, one candle light. And that's when, and this is creepy, he starts hearing words coming from around him. The words were saying, quote, Christora, Kyriastora, Kyria, Maria Cray, Christora, Maria Christora.
Okay.
It scares Joe. And that would be fucking scary. I think it would be scary if you were just stuck in a hole full of poop and semen. But add the fact that that's in the middle of the night in the bottom of a 20-foot hole in a haunted building, probably. Because this building that he had bought was run down. It had been built in the 1800s. That's scary. Joe starts looking around. He's panicking. He's looking up. He's looking from side to side. He doesn't know where this is coming from. And then he reaches up and sticks 2 fingers to his own throat and feels vibrations. Joe realizes he's the one saying it.
Whoa. Oh man, that mental illness is just wild. It's so
Yeah.
I feel so.
It's weird how it kind of shows itself in different people, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
you just end up asking for a cigarette outside of a gas station. Other times you end up waist deep in a pit of your own semen and poop, making up Gregorian chants.
Yeah, and wow. Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah. Sometimes you just end up making mukbang videos on YouTube and slowly gaining weight over a number of years until you're morbidly obese and near death. Shout out to Nakado Avocado. Other times you end up waist deep in a puddle of your own semen and shit, thinking about hats on helicopters, which wouldn't work
No.
if you think about that at all. That would be a lot of work for a hat to just be destroyed in milliseconds. Just right off. To be fair, it would be easier to make a large hat for a helicopter than a small suit for a hamster.
It's true. Like if you're picking projects, yeah.
I'll take the helicopter. 10 out of 10.
Yep.
I don't have the dexterity. And I'm just like Joe, not a tailor. That's why that was crazy. So one night, like I said, he's down here in this hole. He takes a particularly large shit. And right afterwards, he has a thought, an idea. 3 of his kids, Mary Jo, Stephen, and Joey, had been getting into trouble a lot. And that's putting it mildly. They were fucking nightmares in the neighborhood. And I cannot imagine why.
I cannot
imagine why his children would be probably going through some shit of their own, only they're going through it metaphorically.
Oh, jeez.
I know there are kids that act out at school because their parents yell at them from time to time, and even that's fair. But these kids are being woke up in the middle of the night and having to dig a large pit in an old house so their dad can poop and jizz in it.
Yeah.
Like these kids, if any kids have a right to act out, I feel like it's these ones. I read multiple stories in old newspapers about how horrible the kids were, Joe's kids were. They were goons, honestly. They were known for tearing phone cables out of neighbors' houses just for meanness. For no reason. They would steal anything that wasn't bolted down, and they graffitied the whole goddamn town.
I mean, I don't know a lot about them, but I'm going to draw a correlation to parenting or lack thereof, maybe.
I bet something's going on at home.
I mean, what else are you going to do when you're done digging a hole for your dad to poop in? What else you got to do?
Now, Joey in particular, he got arrested on a pretty regular basis. He was brought home by the cops probably more times than he wasn't. Both Joey and Michael, both of them 10, 11, 12 years old, smoked nonstop cigarettes. And just to let you know what kind of kids we're dealing with here, here's a fun one for you, Op. On one occasion, Joey gets on a rooftop when he's 11 years old and sells blowjobs for 50 cents a piece.
Wow. I remember, it's so funny. This is almost the same. I remember clearly in the...
You sold blowjobs for 50 cents a piece? Op's like, no, a quarter.
In 7th grade, I sold blow pops because I got them.
Oh.
It just didn't, it made sense to me. I went to 7-Eleven and spent like like 65 cents on a blow pop. But
imagine how frustrating and disappointing those transactions were for the hearing impaired.
Yeah, good point.
So many upset 65-year-old men.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
What'd you say, son? Oh, he's like fumbling in his pockets. Oh, Jesus. When you pull out a sucker, oh, shucks.
Yes. Wow.
So Joey's up on this rooftop selling blowjobs for 50 cents a piece. Posted up at the stairs to the rooftop is his 12-year-old sister, Mary Jo, and she's kind of his pimp. She was the money collector. So you had to go through Mary to get to the blowjob guy.
Yeah.
On the rooftop, 11-year-old Joey. 9 kids paid for blowjobs that day.
Wow.
9, and a couple wanted their money back because they didn't climax. They didn't orgasm. And Joey said that's not his fault, and he started charging a quarter for each additional minute.
So, what?
What? Did you ask what? You want me to tell you again?
No, not the whole thing. I was just...
Your 50 cents when you paid for the blowjob only covered 2 minutes. And for every minute after that, it was a quarter extra. And, Joey would tell the kids, you can go home if you want or pay the quarter. I'm the only one giving 50-cent blowjobs around here, and I think that's capitalism. You can charge whatever you want if you're the only one supplying the product.
In my head, I had to do the this is a boy offering blowjobs.
This is a 11-year-old boy. His 12-year-old sister, Mary Jo, is the money collector.
She's the bouncer, and these are, I guess. I mean, if you're gonna get that, boys are lining up. Boys are 9 boys.
Yeah, 9 boys, 9 of them. That's enough. That's one short of having 2 basketball teams.
In my head, I'm trying to put myself in that situation, and somebody in the hall says, "Hey, Billy's giving blowjobs on the roof. If you want one." In my head, I'm like, I'm trying to think if that even resonates with me, and the answer's super not. Doesn't at all.
There couldn't have been a lot of eye contact in that hallway.
If it were Betty, but that's a rare breed. I mean, that's saying a lot about those kids. To just be like, I don't know, not that. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's the 70s. What are you going to do? So Mary Jo had a stopwatch or a little pocket watch, and she would keep the time and take care of the money transactions.
Okay. Wow.
Just being kids.
Kids.
On a late night in June of 1969, after another particularly large shit in his hole, Joe has a realization, like I said. Like I said, these children have been getting in trouble. They're giving blowjobs for 50 cents a piece, which is like, know your worth. But,
Stop it. I can just see you. You're the kid in the hallway. You're like, wait, what? Billy's on the roof. How much is he selling for? You're like up there, like helping him with his marketing.
That's what I have an issue with.
Your issue is you're like, you got three things to consider. You got time, you got quality, and you got
Location. This is in the middle of the city, Joey. You're the only one with the supply.
so much disturbed. Like, I feel like this story hasn't moved forward at all. It's stalled on the boy giving bloat. Okay, I gotta slow my roll.
And why the fuck isn't Mary Jo spinning a sign out front?
Why isn't it flipped? And Mary Jo's doing it, and he's taking the money. That's what.
Okay, now you're being a creep.
Okay, all right. Holy cow! Oh my gosh.
One kid shy of two basketball teams got blown on the roof that day.
Okay.
And if you do the math, that's $4.50, not counting the extra minutes paid to reach completion.
Funny thing is, I was just writing down the math. Okay. All right. Oh, wow.
Assuming that at least half of them needed more than 2 minutes, they made at least $6.
Okay.
And let me do a inflation converter here. That was one that I forgot to convert. $6. Let's see here. $6 in 1969. That's a lot of dicks in your mouth. $6 in 1969 today equals $51.
That's a. You can buy a lot of.
But hold on. I don't feel like I'm being fair. I did say that's a lot of dicks, but you got to take in $51, 9 kids total. It's only 2 minutes apiece. That was the agreement. You get 50 cents, you get 2 minutes. 9 times 2 is only 18 minutes. That's almost $150 an hour.
He's all right. When you put it that way, okay.
I'll be honest. If I could make $150 an hour sucking cocks, I'd quit the podcast tonight.
Wow.
I'll get on the roof of my house and have Heaven start spinning signs in the front yard.
I will wager there's at least 1.5 pimps that listen to this show. Expect a phone call.
Big, burly, hairy-chested man willing to blow you on the roof of his house.
Wow.
$150 an hour.
Oh.
Motherfucking milk ain't free. $5 a goddamn gallon now. You know how much milk 3 kids drink? We're going through like 4 gallons of milk a week. Get them out your pants, boys. I got kids to raise.
Okay.
Oh, maybe we should stop here.
Nah, yeah.
Maybe this is where we... On a late night in June of 1969, after a particularly large shit in his hole, he's jerked off, he's shit on the jerk-off juice, Joe has a realization. His kids are getting in trouble. They're going down the wrong paths, and he needs to step up as a father and start disciplining them. They need discipline. That's when he decides to turn the cellar of his home into a fucking torture chamber. So it's like, yeah, the first idea was good, but then we overshot the mark. You know, like way overshot the mark. Like maybe they just need grounded and you need to stop pooping and shitting in this hole and stay away from pet shops.
Yeah.
So in the basement of his house, he's on a large metal table. He lines up. This is the house on Front Street, the one connected to the shoe repair business. He lines up a heavy rope, 2 feet of rubber hose, a box of straight pins, strips of leather, and a homemade cat o' nine tails, just like the one his dad used on him when he was a kid. He called these things his, quote, educational materials. And this is the point when the severe physical abuse starts with Mary Jo, Stevie, and Joey. Joe knew that one of his kids had done something wrong, even when he wasn't looking at them or watching them, because when one of them had done something wrong, the palm of his left hand would start to itch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how he knew. If he was out working, if he's in the shop working, and at 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, and his palm started to itch, someplace, one of his kids was doing something wrong that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
His left hand also ends up being his stabbing hand later, his power hand. It's like, this is my jabbing hand, and this is my jerking hand.
Sounds like that old rusty knee that knows when a storm's coming. You kind of wonder.
Exactly. Only he had an itchy palm that knows when his kids are doing wrong. Now, when a night came up for re-education, as he called it, Joe would get a hallucination at midnight. Every night that it was time that one of the kids needed punished, he'd get a hallucination at midnight, a visual hallucination. He would see a huge clock emerging from smoke. And on each hour of the face of the clock, it was represented by an Arabic numeral. Except for 12. 12 was represented by a white human skull. And at noon, when it clicked on the skull, he would hear the ring 12 times, and that meant when he got this hallucination, it was time for re-education. And he would pick one of the kids randomly. There was no rhyme or reason to it.
So his hand itched, but it didn't tell him which kid.
No, but in his head, he picked the right one every time. It was just somehow he picked the right one every time. He didn't have to know, like in his head, what he knew. His hand really knew which one.
Right.
And the way he put it in the book, like even if he didn't pick the right one, he knew they'd done something fucked up that day.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah. Makes you wonder if he didn't really know that.
I bet he didn't. Now that I'm thinking about it, I bet he didn't. Might have just had poison ivy. Or some kind of fungus. Hell, you're crawling around in a hole full of shit and semen. Bound to bring something home on your palms. I bet the belly of his cock was also blistered. Now, there were rules to re-education. For instance, only one kid was to be re-educated at a time, and they were only to be re-educated after midnight.
Okay.
I mean, these are just a few instances of what he would do to the kids when he dragged them down to the torture chamber. He would tie Mary Jo up naked and throw pins at her naked body, needles.
Really?
He would tie up Joey or Stevie and flog them with the cat of nine tails. Flog them with the bits of leather.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Wow.
Now, while all this is going on, he's also waking up extra early every morning before heading down to the shop and pacing in the living room in his most recent incarnation of his experiment shoes.
So he's back to making his own trials. Okay.
Back to human trials. So he'll get up at say he's got to be at work at 6. He'll get up at 4, go into the living room and just walk a line. Just back and forth. And he's got a table there with his notebook on it. He'll stop, take notes, make adjustment to the wedges in his shoes, and then walk again.
Okay.
He also starts getting inspirations for testing his newest shoe designs late at night. Sometimes at around midnight, he'll get completely dressed up in a suit, put on his new test shoes, and go on a long walk through the city. He does it alone at first.
Sounds harmless.
Yeah, well, let me finish this sentence.
Crap.
He does it alone at first, but then he starts waking the kids up again and making them walk with him, even on school nights. These walks would last hours and cover miles. Sometimes it would be just one of the kids. Sometimes he'd wake every goddamn one up. I'd make him walk with him in the middle of the night. And I just let to see a fly on the wall. I just know in my head, knowing what kind of woman Betty was, his wife. He rolls over. He's like, honey, it's 2 a.m. I'm taking the kids for a walk. Gotta save humanity. The hamsters are dead. My hole is piling up with poop and semen, Betty. And then it's just... And she's like half asleep. She's like does that stretch that they do in the movies with a smile. She's like, okay, honey. You guys be careful. Love you. Man. Her inner thoughts are like, I married an amazing, funny man. So funny. Joe. Be careful, honey. The hamsters are dead, Betty. We've got to walk. The little shoes wouldn't fit on their feet, Betty. I was going to make them suits and hats. Little hats, Betty. The hole's filling with poop and semen, Betty. Love you, baby. You guys be careful. Call me if things get crazy. Call me if you run into a lunatic.
That's a good point. That probably never did it cross his mind that he'd run into a lunatic. It was always him.
He was the lunatic. That was, that old saying, like, if you're so-and-so, blah, 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 and you look around and you realize you don't have that person in your group, you're probably the person in the group.
Oh, man.
Now, the kids did try to make these walks more exciting for themselves. They started rummaging through garbage cans on the walks, looking for fun things that people had thrown away, and they'd bring that home. That's a good time, I guess.
I guess.
Now, it's also around this time that Joe starts getting extremely paranoid on top of everything else that's already going on.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm shocked. I'm not shocked.
He begins to believe that people are out to get him, as well as his kids and wife. So, he turns his house into a goddamn fortress. Seriously, he installs steel cages over every single window on the first floor.
Wow.
The neighbors start referring to Joe's house as Kallinger's castle.
He's not preventing his family from leaving yet. Is it to protect the...
Yeah, it's for both.
So it's not just protecting...
It's to prevent people from getting in and also to prevent his family from getting out.
Okay. All right. Jeez.
Now, the building across the street was the office of Democrat District State Representative Harry Comer. And poor Harry died in 1990. Long life of politics. So fuck him. But he might have been a nice guy. I just fucking hate politicians. But across the street is the Harry Comer's office.
Okay.
And Joe begins to believe that because this is a politician, the government has to have CIA agents posted up spying on him.
Must have.
Yep. So one morning at 4 a.m., Joe takes a steel ball from a pinball machine. This is at 4 in the morning. And in the middle of the night, from an open window of his upstairs bedroom, throws that steel ball across the street and breaks the huge front window out of Harry Comer's building. And then he goes back to bed. The next morning.
Where you been, honey?
Joe, what are you doing? Well, stay with me. Listen. The man across the street.
No way. Like, he could never explain these things to us. There's no way. If she was listening at all, there's no way.
Betty, and the whole story, Betty is kind of like an afterthought to everything. It kind of seems like she just lived her life with her head in the sand.
Yeah.
Like, she knew what was... I don't think she knew how to handle this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Betty knew what to do with this. So she just kind of, probably in her own way, started kind of going crazy herself. Just like, that's Joe.
Yeah.
Just got to make the casserole. I've just got to make this casserole. He's in the living room. Little hats! Well, you can have suits! She's like, more peas.
Yeah.
More peas. It just needs more peas. That'll make him stop.
Well, and you wonder, like, that whole psychological dependency thing. It's like, oh, I would be out on my butt if I pushed back on this crazy man, or dead. Maybe she did fear him.
Yeah, she's probably afraid of him.
Yeah. Okay.
But it seems like, in the entire story, there's never really a lot of abuse on Betty.
Right.
She always just kind of seems to be in the background, just doing wifely things and trying to ignore what's going on.
In your opinion, at this point in the timeline, what is the most atrocious thing you think she's aware of?
The abuse of the children.
Okay.
She definitely knows about it. And you'll see why in a moment.
I think that's a hard one. I mean, you see that.
Oh, yeah. Unforgivable.
Yeah.
Her role in this, unforgivable. But I think...
But also understand, like, there's that textbook thing that's like...
I think she was scared.
Yeah. I mean, you can't forgive them, but we see it. You see it all the time. It's the wife or the mother knows, is fully aware of, like, some abuse of some sort. And it's a hard one.
The book described Betty as a passive observer.
Okay.
That's what she was described as. From the beginning to the end of the story.
All right.
Passive observer. But I do like to think that there was a part of her that was also going crazy and just trying to, like, sew together some kind of normal existence out of this craziness. Like,
Right. Yeah.
Listen, Betty. I know it's 4 a.m, okay? But you hear me out. The guy across the street has CIA operatives. And they're spying on us, Betty. She's like, Joe, it's like you're a shoemaker, Joe. Yeah, but the suits, the little suits. They heard about that, Betty. The little hats. It's going to make little hats. They heard about the helicopter hats, Betty. So he knocks out Harry Comer's window from across the street with a pinball ball. And then helps poor Harry Comer board up the building the next day and is like, it's a shame this happens, Harry. Can't fucking have anything. Can't fucking have anything. Goddamn hoodlums. And then he considers the matter solved because this window's boarded up now. You can't look through. CI can't look through a boarded up window. Can't spy on him no more. But a week later, to Joe's horror, a new window was in its place. So, that night, armed with pinball machine balls, Betty, look, hear me out. The CIA put a new window in over there, Betty. I've got to take it out. He busts the window out again. And then the next day, he helps Harry Comer board up that window. He does this up 3 times. 3 times.
He's the one that's doing it, but then he helps.
He's the one that's doing it. And then he goes over the next day and helps Harry board up the window, and he's just like, these goddamn kids. I swear to God, you can't fucking have nothing.
Wow.
Crying goddamn shame, Harry.
Wow.
Yeah, you'll get my vote next for sure. Yeah. On the 3rd time, Harry puts a shatterproof window in, and that's it. Joe can't shatter it. He tries, but he can't break that window anymore. And then he just kind of gives up. He's like, well, I guess they're spying on me. Can't do anything about it now. In 1971, Stephen Kallinger, Joe's father, goes into hospice because of cancer. You would think that, considering the background, this is the man that abused Joe growing up, Joe would feel at most indifferent about this, but Joe was heartbroken by this. And they said that on Stephen's deathbed there, Joe, during his last moments, Stephen's last moments, the last thing he saw was Joe at his feet, just rubbing his feet and his heels, just like in a panic, trying to keep the life in his body.
Really?
Because he believed that your life was in your feet. Don't you hold on, Papa.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm squeezing that life back in like it's a fucking mustard packet.
Oh, wow.
Imagine that's the way you go out. Like, you've got hospice face, right? Which is one side of your mouth is drooped low, and you just look down. And then there's your son. He's probably got a little poo on his brow, just rubbing your feet, trying to keep you alive.
Makes you really think your life's normal. Like, you think about, like, even a boring Tuesday in this guy's life is like, you couldn't imagine. Oh, okay.
Well, that's the fun thing, I would say. The one fun thing about being schizophrenic is nothing's ever boring.
No, you're never alone. That's for sure.
You make your fun.
Yeah.
Whether you want to be chased by a gorilla or not. That's happening at Walgreens. Over there by the Robitussin.
Oh, man.
In early July of 1971, probably the first bit of good news in this whole story, Joe has a period op of 3 weeks, almost a month, where he is completely free of hallucinations, voices, intrusive thoughts, and everything else of his mental illness. Free of it all. Completely normal for 3 weeks. And I know this sounds great.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why.
Okay.
There's always a catch.
All right.
There's always a catch. The reason he was feeling so good and all of his mental illness went away is because Joe realized he was in love with his 12-year-old daughter, Mary Jo.
Okay. So the reason he didn't have voices was because his brain was preoccupied with something else, basically.
He claims that that's what was going on. He found his true love, his 12-year-old daughter, Mary Jo. Now,
Right.
to our, at least as far as we're aware, at least, there wasn't any sexual abuse between Mary Jo and Joe. At least, he never admitted to it, at least. So Joe's in love with his 12-year-old daughter, he realizes. The two of them start going out to dinner together. He buys, they go on dates. He gives her gifts like necklaces and jewelry. For a brief period here, he becomes obsessed with her. Now, all of this was, of course, very one-sided. Mary Jo, poor Mary Jo, just thought it was neat that she was getting to spend a lot of time with her dad. That didn't include digging a hole or going on long walks at 1 o'clock in the morning. She just thinks she's hanging out with Dad. But Joe considers them to be dating.
Oh, okay. That's
Now, in the book, Joe says that at the end of the third week, he realizes how fucked up the whole situation was and breaks it off. But breaking off the relationship sends Joe back into that downward spiral, according to him. Like, the second he broke it off, all of the symptoms of the schizophrenia return.
That doesn't bode well for, like, if you're looking for a prescription to stop the voices, that prescription seems like the worst.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree. Wow. I agree. I'd rather have the voices.
Yeah.
And to be honest, being at the bottom of a hole, jerking off and pooping, kind of sounds like a good time. I mean, not so much the pooping.
None of it sounds good. There's not one bit of this that sounds like...
After breaking it off with his daughter, he spends more time down in his hole there on East...
He broke it off with his daughter in his own mind because she had no idea what was going on.
After it stops, she's like, does Dad not love me anymore? I don't understand.
Why aren't we going to baseball games anymore, Dad?
After breaking it off, he spends a whole lot more time down in his hole in the house there on East Haggard Street, just pooping and whacking off. Just the water table was rising, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Joe also gets super jealous of Mary Jo, of any boys that she's around after this. He hates her boyfriends, or he hates any guy friends that she has, like a jealous boyfriend. If they gave her gifts, he would tear them up. He also forbid her from seeing any other boys. On January 1st, 1972, Joe was in the basement of his house there in the torture chamber, taking inventory. Suddenly, remember the bright light that appeared when he was 15?
Yeah.
Remember when it was God in part 1?
Yeah.
And God told him, hey, you've got to make good shoes to save mankind.
Yeah. And then it said other stuff, and then he touched his own throat and realized it's his larynx.
No, that wasn't God. That was Joe. God only spoke to Joe up until this point one other time, and that was when he was 15. God showed up and said, you've got to make shoes for mankind. You got to save mankind.
Okay. All right. So he's making a reappearance after many years.
God's showing back up. Yeah. God's coming in for an encore.
I'm getting confused with who exactly are the voices that aren't real.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in Joe, and I'm excited to meet Charlie, and we're not going to get to meet Charlie until part 3. And Charlie is probably going to be the funniest part of this story, because Charlie is a real character. And Charlie is inside Joe as we speak.
I've heard that before.
Suddenly, the only person to have more people inside them, honestly, is Joe's son, Joey.
Oh my gosh.
That was on a roof. Suddenly, so God shows up in this bright light. Joe knows it's God, and this is what God says.
I'm doing that part.
You do the God voice of God. Remember, you do the booming. You did the effect.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Let me get the voice. Okay.
Joseph, I control you now.
That's all it said. And because of this, Joe now believes that's all it needed to say to really fuck over mankind. Because now Joe believes that because God is controlling him, everything he does is directly sanctioned and approved by God himself.
Sort of like the conquistadors of history.
Like a lot of people, actually.
Yeah.
This has happened several times in history. And a lot of people have died. So many people are dead. Sunday, January 23rd, 1972. Joey and Mary Jo, this is Joe's son and his daughter, they had gone out the night before on Saturday and had not returned. And Joe is pissed off. He's pacing in his living room. This feels disrespectful to him, and that's when he decides he's going to go out and find them. He gets a .45 semi-automatic pistol, loads his family into a taxi, and starts cruising looking for Mary Jo and Joey. An hour into his search, he sees them coming out of the Midway movie theater there at Allegheny and Kensington Avenue. There were 3 other kids from the neighborhood. Those kids' names were Susan, Johnny, and Willie Strong. And that pissed Joe off even more because Mary Jo's hanging out with other boys. He has the cab driver follow the kids for a bit and then pulls the cab over and hops out. He pulls the gun on his 2 children, Mary Jo and Joey, and orders them to get into the car. And they do. And this is further proof about how crazy the goddamn 70s were, because the cab driver just goes along with it.
So clarify for me. Is he aware of the BJs on the roof?
I don't know about that. I don't know if he's aware of the BJs on the roof.
Okay. So we know that he finds displeasure with...
Maybe his throat itched.
We know that he finds displeasure with his daughter's activities, but we're not sure what he thinks about his sons yet. Okay. I just wanted to make sure on that.
At the house, when they return to the house, he follows his kids inside, and then Betty, who is getting ready to take off her coat at the door, he looks at his wife, Betty, and he says, "Take the remaining children and go get pizzas for dinner.
Yum.
Leave me with Mary Jo and Joey." And Betty, after hearing this, she's like, "Okay, honey." Pepperoni?
Okay.
I was going to make a casserole. If you went into the kitchen, there's just casseroles everywhere. Just some of them a year old, just piles and piles of where she's just trying to get through life, just making casseroles. That's all.
Oh, man. Nothing else she can do.
But if you look, it's just shoe soles.
Shoe soles and rat parts.
Baked shoe soles. Just his whole existence is like a Black Hole Sun music video. She's just making casserole. She's smiling. She looks like the ideal 50s wife. But it's not a casserole. It's old shoe parts.
Oh, man.
He orders the kids and the kids and Betty out to go get pizzas. Leave me with Mary Jo and Joey. So Betty does. Mary Jo sits down on the couch. And while Mary Jo's sitting on the couch, Joe takes Joey into the kitchen and handcuffs him to the fridge. He then grabs a metal spatula and goes back into the living room. Mary Jo's sitting there on the couch. He stands in front of her, pulls a switchblade from his pocket, puts it to her throat, and orders Mary Jo to undress down to her bra and panties. And she does. Then he takes a section of rope, ties her hands behind her back and her ankles. There in the living room of that house above the shoe shop, they were heating it with a kerosene stove, which was on, and they had been, like I said, using it to heat the home. He takes that metal spatula that he had gotten from the kitchen and lays it on top of it and waits. When the spatula is almost red hot, he takes it off the stove, gets down on his knees in the floor beside Mary Jo, who's tied up and naked, and begins whisper singing, quote, "You will never run away from me again.
Wow.
You will never run away from me again." And then he presses the red hot spatula to the inside of her right thigh an inch below her vagina.
Whoa.
Mary Jo screamed and cried, but she was tied up. She couldn't do anything but wallow while he held it to her inside of her thigh. After it had stopped sizzling, he took the spatula off, laid it back on the heater, and waited for it to get hot again. While it was getting hot, he stands up, goes back into the kitchen where Joey is tied up, takes a hammer from a kitchen drawer, breaks the head off of the hammer, and then uses the wooden part and just beats the shit out of Joey with it. He beats him across his head, across his shins, across his knees, his knuckles of his hands, over and over and over again. Joe repeats this process several times, going back and forth between Mary Jo and Joey. He'd let the spatula heat up red hot, burn her on the same spot. He always pushed it on the same spot, on the inside of the thigh, and then go and beat Joey with the hammer handle. After it was all over, he untied both of them, sent them to their room, and then just went back to work on his shoe experiments in the shop.
Oh.
A few moments later, Betty got home with the rest of the family, and they had a delicious pizza dinner.
And not a word was said.
And not a word was said. Everybody pretended like nothing happened.
Wow. Wow.
Do you guys smell that? I didn't make pork chops. This pizza's delicious. I love you, honey.
Oh my gosh.
Mary Jo, you're walking weird. Why? Don't answer that. Don't. La, 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 la. I've got to go make a casserole.
Oh my gosh.
1 week later, on Sunday, January 30th, Michael, Joey, and Mary Jo finally, this is brave, what they do here. This is very brave. Michael's 10 years old at the time, Joey is 11, and Mary Jo is 12. The three of them get together, hit the street, and walk to the police station and tell the officers that their father has been severely beating, burning, and abusing them. The children are examined, and they do find that Mary Jo's rear end is covered with crisscross top lacerations from the cat o' nine tails. And that they also discover the huge burn on the inside of her thigh. It was a very serious burn. Joey also had bruises on his forehead, face. He had a black eye and bruising on parts of the rest of his body from the hammer. Later that day, the very same day, Joe was arrested for child abuse charges and sent to Holmesburg prison to await his trial. Now, during all this, Kallinger and his wife, Betty, denied the abuse charges and said that the children had just run away. They don't know why they had those bruises and everything on them. Joe spent 7 months in prison awaiting trial, and he couldn't get out because the bail was $75,000. He also spent 7 months in a jail cell with a very large Mexican fellow who every night saw an imaginary bear in his cell and went fucking crazy.
Oh, wait.
And Joe, out of all this, thought the wildest thing was that they had locked him in a cell with a crazy person.
I was going to say, they're two peas in a pod. Wow. Wow.
They got me in here with these crazy people.
$75,000 bail in the 70s. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, this was a big deal. If you comb through old newspapers in the Philly area during this time, this was on all the newspapers. It was a big deal. I mean, it was very public. Very public.
Oh, jeez.
On June 6, 1972, Joe Kallinger was found guilty of child abuse. And on August 26, 1972, a little bit over 2 months later, when he's 36 years old, Joe was released on bail.
Somebody paid the bail.
Yeah, they lowered the bail at his trial from $75,000 to $5,000. And Betty paid the bail. And Joe was allowed to return home from prison where he's sentenced to 4 years probation with mandatory psychiatric treatment at the Episcopal Hospital.
There you go.
Joe's home now.
Okay.
He did a total of 9 months. Unfortunately, however you want to look, I guess unfortunately, because there is a family involved here. Well, we'll see how you feel about it. The charges and the time he had spent in jail and how public this whole thing had been ruined Joe's business, his shoe repair business.
This is what it took. This after all the...
Yeah, a lot of his customers were prominent figures in the community. I mean, he was a good shoemaker. A lot of politicians and judges and police officers, they all bounced when these allegations came out. He lost all of his customer base.
Do you think there was ever a scenario that played out where it was like, hey, Joe, I'm here to pick up my shoes. And he's like, let me show you. You got a second? Let me show you. Let me show you a prototype I'm working on. And he goes and gets his...
Look at my hamsters.
hamster. Now, check those shoes out. Those look like quality shoes, right? Would you wear those? I mean, if they were bigger.
I made you a new set of shoes. And he goes and gets them in their hamster size. It's like, here. Take them, Judge. Takes a bite of casserole. So Joe loses his customer space. The business is tanking, and with money drying up, the business failing, one night, Joe calls his sons, Mike and Joey, into the shop and has them sit down. He's getting ready to have a heart-to-heart. He tells them, hey, do you like having money? You like having nice clothes? We eat steak for dinner occasionally. You like all that shit? And they're like, yeah, Dad, what's it to you?
Just out there.
They got a cigarette in their mouth because they're like, the way the book even described them, they're kind of like little greasers. Yeah, what's it to you, Pops? They got a cigarette in. He says, hey, if you like that shit, you need to go and recant your these abuse charges. And you need to talk Mary Jo into doing the same thing. Never mind the fact that he'd actually done this stuff. He talks the victims into taking it back. Joey, in particular, who was a bully in school and was very proud of having a dad that had his own business. Joey considered most of the other kids below him. He was on board with recanting these accusations because he did not want to be poor. He liked his social status. So because of this, all the kids agree.
Jeez.
And on February 15th, 1974, the kids come forward and tell Judge Edward J. Bradley that they had made up all of the stories of child abuse.
Isn't that called witness tampering?
It's the 70s. What are you going to do? It's the 70s.
Yeah.
They also provided evidence that it had all been made up by showing the judge journals that actually Joe and Joey had written that were predated before the abuse, saying that they had been plotting to frame their dad for child abuse.
So they just wrote the dates that they needed, and the judge was like, "Well, looks legit to me." Never mind.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. You're joking, but that's exactly what happened.
Never mind all of the photos of the burns and bruises and the police reports. Never mind all that. The judge.
Never mind all of that.
Wow, this judge has a soup for brains.
It gets worse. Because Joey, one of the abused, is pinned as the mastermind of this whole thing and sent to the Eastern State School and Hospital in Trevose for mental evaluation.
Oh, so he didn't just recant. He took a bath for his dad.
Yes.
Wow.
He's not released from that reformatory until May 15th.
Wow.
4 months he's in there. About half the time his dad served for all the abuse. When he is released, however, when little Joey is released from the reformatory, he's released with papers that say he is seriously disturbed.
Yeah.
Now, with the charges dropped against Joe Kallinger, he has a clean record once again, and business starts returning. Everything's back to normal for Joe Kallinger.
Yeah. Okay. Son's out of the picture.
Well, he was for a little bit. We're on May 15th. A few months later, he comes back home from the reformatory.
Okay.
But yeah, everything's back to normal.
Again, this is where it starts creeping in my head. I'm like, I could never have gotten away with any of this. Like, all of these criminals are like, I don't get it. It's amazing. I would have done life.
Wild life. Joe, you're silly.
Here's some casserole.
Recipe calls for 2 shoestrings. She's sucking them up like spaghetti. Al dente. Between November of 1973 and June of 1974, Joe and his son Michael have a new adventure, a new business plan. Because during that time up, Joe and his son Michael, and Michael will play a huge part in the rest of this story. Michael was kind of Joe's little protege. He was his favorite son. But between November of 73 and June of 74, Joe and Michael start doing burglaries around Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And they do over 24 burglaries together.
Wow.
They start burglarizing homes. Joe and Michael do together. They would go out on God's orders, according to Joe. The houses would be picked by God. And also, God starts mocking Joe and really pressuring him with a new order. This is straight from God. God tells Joe...
That's me again.
God tells Joe...
Okay, 1 sec. I'm just like thinking it's a pause.
God tells Joe...
You must destroy what you couldn't save with the orthopedic experiments. The destruction of the hamsters was the beginning. You continued by burning. You continued by burning Mary Jo's thigh. Only we're going to shove the hot spatula up into her vagina and guts. But you chickened out and burned only the soft flesh near her vagina. Now the time has come for you, with Michael's help, to kill 3 billion people.
A tall order.
3 billion?
Joe's new mission from God is to kill every human being on earth. 1 at a time.
1 at a time.
Now on this, and Michael is supposed to help him, remember? His son Michael's supposed to help him. And on this, Joe would later say, quote, I had been a fearful child. Now I was a fearful adult. But Michael wasn't afraid of anything. He had none of the fears I had at his age. In the summer of 74, he was 12 and a half years old. I needed someone who was cold and fearless to help me kill 3 billion people. And I need someone I loved and trusted, and that was Michael. He didn't have a nerve in his body, and he was also my beloved son. Also, I knew that my penis wasn't as large as his, so he would have the power that I didn't have. Unquote.
Wow.
Michael doesn't have a little bird, so he's going to be more powerful.
Yeah, he's gonna. Somebody save those children.
On June 26, 1974, upon his orders from God, Joe approaches his 13-year-old son, Michael, with the big penis and tells him that he needs his help to kill 3 billion people. He says, Michael, God talked to me. He says, we need to kill 3 billion people. And by the way, the ones that are little boys, we have to cut their penises off. Michael rolls this idea around in his head for about 0.7 seconds and then says loudly, quote, glad to do it, Dad.
Jeez.
And I used to get uncomfortable when my father would take me hunting on private property. That's a lot to drop on your 13-year-old. Hey, buddy, what you doing? Hey, how do you hey, sport. Punch him in the shoulder lightly. What you doing there, buddy? And he's like, oh, just killing hamsters. Anyways, we've got, listen, Michael. So there's this thing that came up. Turns out, yeah, that's a very nice picture you drew. I like that. Yeah. There's this thing that came up. You've got a big penis, okay? And that makes you powerful. So because of that, we're going to have to kill 3 billion people, Michael. 3 billion people. By the way, and just side note, the ones that are kids, turns out we got to we got to cut their penises off. Michael. Glad to do it, Dad! That sounds good, son. Now put your pants back on. Sunday, July 7th, 1974, at 3 p.m., 2 weeks later, while they're at the shop there working, Joe approaches Michael and whispers in his ear, quote, today is the day. We got to kill somebody. Michael looks at him and says, he whispers back, sounds good, Dad. I'll help you. At 4 p.m., an hour later, Joe and Michael leave the shop on foot looking for a victim. And at 6:30 p.m., after an hour and a half of walking around, they find him. They're in front of the Man Recreation Center on 5th Avenue and Allegheny Avenue. And there's a swimming pool. It was open, and there were a lot of kids running around. They spot a short, skinny, dark-skinned 10-year-old Puerto Rican boy by the name of Jose Kallinger. Joe decides this will be the first kill on his father and son journey to complete total world massacre.
Low bar, setting not going for an apex target.
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day.
At this pace, it's never going to get built.
You got to start with the first brick.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay.
Jose is sitting off by himself there, and he's playing with a lighter. Said he was flicking it open and clicking it and flicking it, watching the flame, just kind of being a 10-year-old in the 70s.
Yeah.
Michael approaches him, and the two talk for a second. After a brief moment of talking, Michael looks at Joe, his dad, smiles, nods, and winks. That was Joe's cue. Joe walked up to Jose and said, quote, we need some help moving some boxes of ribbon. Will you help us? Mike added, yeah, we'll pay you to help us too. Jose nodded and said, okay, but I have to be home by 9. Joe and Michael began walking down the street. Said Michael was closest to the road, and then Jose, and then Joe. And they walked to an abandoned rug factory down the road there in Kensington, and that rug factory was located at Hancock and Westmoreland Streets. Once inside that dark, abandoned factory, Jose panics. This is all looking off to him. There's no power to this factory. It's pitch black in there. It's abandoned. Once they go inside, Jose starts to panic and says he has to be home. He's got to get home. He's got to get home. But when he begins to panic, Michael and Joe grab each of his arms. Each one grabs an arm, and they drag him up a flight of stairs. At the top of the stairs, Michael, Joe's son, orders Jose to undress. While he's undressing, Joe pulls out a roll of black duct tape from a bag he was carrying and tosses that duct tape to Michael, who then takes one of the boy's socks, shoves it in his mouth, and starts taping around his head and nose. Meanwhile, Joe has pulled out a switchblade and he has cut a cord from a fan, which he's now using to tie Jose's ankles and wrists. Jose, now bound and gagged, is laying naked on the floor. Michael, Joe's son, flips Jose over onto his belly, pulls a pair of gardening shears from the bag, and shoves them into Jose's anus.
Wait.
Over and over again.
So Michael's doing this.
Michael is doing this, the son.
He pulled a pair of gardening. Okay.
After doing this for a moment, Michael, the kid's bleeding profusely from his back end now. Michael rows the boy back over on his back and then takes the gardening shears and cuts the head of the boy's penis off. He then hands the shears and the head of the penis to his father, Joe. Joe puts the shears in his pocket, takes the penis head, puts it in a little plastic bag, and puts that in his pocket as well. 10-year-old Jose Kallinger is mercifully dead now. We don't know if it was from suffocation or blood loss. We will never know. It's a while before they found him, and he was very decomposed at that point. Joe and Michael then gather Jose's clothes and head home. On the way home, they dump his belongings in a railroad yard. They get home at 9 p.m., and at the foot of the steps to the house, Joe and Michael look at each other. The father and son share a smile, and Michael says, "Good night, Dad," and Joe says, "Good night, son." They hug and go to bed. The next day, at his workbench there in the shoe repair business, Joe pulls the bag with the penis in it from the drawer of his work desk, opens it, and smells it. It's starting to rot and beginning to stink. To try and stop the decomposition process so he can have a trophy, he seals the penis head. It's just the penis head. He seals the head in a little block of plaster of Paris. So he makes a little mold, essentially, and then pushes the little penis head down into that plaster of Paris so it's encased, and he essentially has now a rock that's got that penis head in it. But somehow, after 2 weeks, it starts stinking again, he said, after 2 weeks, and he throws it down a sewer drain 4 blocks from his house. Jose Kallinger's body wasn't found until July 27th, 1974. So it was almost a month later. And you got to keep in mind, this is in an abandoned factory. It's hot.
Yeah.
This is July. The body was in pretty bad shape by the time they found it. On early Sunday morning of July 21st, 1974, Joe is laying on his sofa in his living room when he has yet another vivid visual hallucination. As he's laying there looking at the ceiling, he sees a boy being thrown off a mountain and falling down to his death. When the body hit the ground with a crunch, Joe gets an erection. And in Joe's head, the fact that his little bird got hard meant that this was a direct order from God. And that is when he heard God talk.
You must get him up there.
That is when he heard... Oh, you were ready that time, of course.
I was ready this time.
Okay. Go on, God.
Okay. You must get him up there where it's high. Throw him off the edge of the cliff. Make the place you choose to kill him so high that falling will mean certain death.
That's when Joe realized, that God was talking about killing Joey, the most troublesome of his sons. As far as he was concerned, not counting Michael, of course, who was just a few weeks ago cutting the penis off a little boy. The real problem, as far as Joe was concerned, was Joey.
Yeah.
God, immediately after this, said,
You will find the name of a high place in a brochure. on the small table beside your sofa.
So Joe reached over and grabbed a brochure that he had put there.
Right. Yeah, this didn't just appear.
Like, if this thing just appeared, I would be like, okay, well, I can understand this guy. Like, things are appearing, but you put it there, Joe. The brochure, he looks through it, and there he sees an ad for the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon.
Yeah. Can I just say for a moment that like I almost have more rage at this moment for Michael than I do for the Shoemaker, because there's no indication that
He is mentally unwell.
any mental illness other than just being a tiny little monster.
Yeah, he was a tiny little monster.
Wow.
And it's getting ready to get so much worse. Michael enjoyed this stuff.
Yeah, apparently.
We're not even into the gritty, grueling, horrible shit yet. That won't come until part 3.
Oh, great.
And Michael will be beside Joe the entire time. Inside that brochure, Joe finds the spot where he decides Joey, his son, will die. And that spot is the Leonard Harrison Park Lookout. It's a 1,000-foot drop. The same morning, he wakes his kids up. Hey, you guys want to go to the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon today? They're kids. They're excited, of course. He also lets Michael know, hey, guess what? We're going to kill your brother, Joey, today. Upon hearing this of his own brother, they're going to kill his own brother today, Michael excitedly says, oh, yeah, we're going to throw him off the cliff, Dad?
Wow.
Joe says, maybe. And Michael says, why maybe, Dad? And Joe responds, I shit you not. He says this, we'll just see, Michael. Who knows what the day will bring, son?
Wow, that's the response I give my children after eating like McDonald's, and they're like, can we get ice cream after this? We'll see.
Maybe we'll murder your brother at the Grand Canyon, or maybe we'll end up getting ice cream. The day is young.
Jeez.
Let's see where the sunlight takes us.
Oh.
Ah, shucks, Pops. So Joey, Michael, and Jimmy, this was an all-boys trip, apparently. They all leave the house after breakfast that morning on their way to the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon. Now, Joe and Michael are very excited about killing Joey, but they're also very excited about seeing the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon.
It's just, sixes on which one's more exciting.
They were going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We'll get to see the Grand Canyon, and we'll kill Joey for God.
Why do pamphlets have to be involved? Dang it.
Imagine how accomplished he would have felt if he got home, if he had accomplished this today. That night, that feeling. If you like mowed the yard and weed eated and got a lot of work, and you just, after the shower, you're like laying in bed like, didn't waste that day.
Yeah. He feels this way.
Made God happy. Tossed Michael into the canyon. We got to see the canyon. Good day.
Also, I'm sure you're going to get to it, but I'm interested to see have they thought through coming back without him to the house.
No.
Okay.
God will have their back. Don't have to worry about any of that shit.
Sure. Okay.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess fortunately, at the bus station, after purchasing their tickets for the 3-hour ride to the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon, they missed their bus because all of them were in the bathroom taking a shit. I didn't make that up. When he tried to buy another ticket for all of them to the Grand Canyon, Joe is told that was the only bus that was running today. It's Sunday. So he calls an audible on the play. He says, look, we can't get to the Grand Canyon today, kids. Maybe another day, except for you, Joey. But I'll tell you what, around the outskirts of Hazleton is the coal mines and slate pits. That'll be fun. So that's where they go instead, Op.
Not quite the same.
The strip mines and coal mines and slate pits of the outskirts of Hazleton. And that's where Joe decides he's going to push Joey off the top of the strip mines. That'll work. That's high enough, and it definitely is. So they hop on a bus and head for the outskirts of Hazleton. There, the four get off a bus and begin walking, and at the base of the strip mine, they look up, and Joe says, quote, we're going up there, and we're going to see what's on top. They find a rocky footpath and begin their ascent. However, look, Joey was a little shit, okay? A troublesome little bully shit. But this part cracks me up. Halfway up, Joey, the target here, gets tired and sits down and says, yeah, I'm not going any further, Dad. That's it. Joe says, quote, we're going on without you then. And Joey responds, well, fuck you, Daddy. And then he apparently stood up and grabbed his cock and started thrusting his hips while going, fuck you, Daddy. Fuck you, Daddy.
Wow. This is the worst set of people in the world. Oh.
Joe, Jimmy, and Michael kept going up the side of the hill to the top, and a little ways up, Joey yells for him to wait, and he says, I'm coming too, motherfuckers. He's got a cigarette in his mouth. Fucking 12 years old. Fuck you, Daddy. Fuck you, Daddy. Air humping. Up on top, on the flat top of the strip mines, a couple 100 foot up, the Kallinger boys take a break. They made it to the top. This area is rocky and flat. There's no trees or vegetation. Joe sits down and pulls a camera from his bag he was carrying. Now, the three boys, they kind of piddle around up there for a few minutes. Kids toss rocks from the top down to the pit. One of them I read pissed and liked watching his pee go down. That's normal boy stuff, honestly. After a moment, though, Joe tells Jimmy and Joey that he wants to take some pictures and orders them to get to the close to the edge so he can get some cool shots. And they do. Joe takes a picture and he says, get a little closer. And they do. And he takes a picture. And he says, get a little closer. And they do.
Yeah.
And finally, Joey is like a 1/9 of an inch. The back of his heel is right at the lip of the top of the canyon. But Joe isn't making a move up. And that's when Michael whispers in his ear, quote, want me to hit him in the face with a rock? Joe looks down at Michael and nods yes. And then he tells Jimmy, the one that was standing beside Joey, come over here for a second, son. I want to get a picture of you alone. Now Joey is standing at the edge of the canyon by himself, the top of the strip mine there. That's when Michael picks up a large, flat rock and throws it as hard as he can at Joey's head. And misses.
Jeez.
It flies by Joey's head, and Joey says, quote, hey, you trying to kill me or something? And then he goes back to spitting and fucking around at the top of the lip of the canyon. As Michael picks up the second rock, Joe has a sudden change of heart. Suddenly, he doesn't want to kill Joey anymore. He starts feeling fatherly instincts. All the feelings of wanting to kill him are gone. He described it in the book as if you poured out a glass of water. All of that from God, everything was gone. And that's when he silently orders Michael to abandon the mission. Hey, it turns out we're not going to kill Joey today. And Michael's like, shucks. And a few moments later, the family descend the hill back to the bottom, and then they head home. Joey, the entire time, was none the wiser about the plot to murder him.
Wow.
Unfortunately, on July 23rd, 2 days later, 1974, turns out Joe's been talking to God again. And on this day, Joe Kallinger takes out a $45,000 life insurance policy on Joey.
Wow.
And that is where we will pick back up on part 3 and the conclusion of Joseph Kallinger. And the next episode, I'm so excited for you to be introduced to Charlie.
Yeah, me too.
You're going to really get a kick out of Charlie.
Yeah, I'm excited. So he just to clarify there at the end, he decided to kind of up his game on the death of his son, and he's like, hey, I can make some money off this.
If we're going to kill him, we might as well get a penny out of it or two. Beats blowing dudes on the roof.
Jeez. Okay.
Fuck you, Daddy. Fuck you, Daddy. You like that, Daddy? Little bitch.
Not saying he's
Stop it, Joey.
not saying he's a good kid.
Stop it, Joey.
Yeah.
It hurts my feelings.
It's-
Very mean, Joey. And that is, I mean, I know that is kind of how, after the abuse thing, the abuse when they went to the police, after that, Joe was afraid of his kids. And that is how he handled all this stuff. Like, oh, stop it, Joey.
He
Fuck you, Daddy. Fuck you, Daddy.
created little monsters.
Embarrassing.
Oof. Well, you know, usually I'm like, see you tomorrow for the next episode, but I will just wait as long as you need. You just take it.
Oh, tomorrow.
Dang. All right. Well, love you so much till.
Okay, if you like this episode, don't forget to rate and review on iTunes. Yep. Bah! Daddy?